Okay, it's 12:03. Welcome to Latin 19. It is a very special day of the today is a different day because today we are hosting together with the Access for Immigrants project, el proyecto Ser Hispano, liderado por la doctora Rosa González Guarda de la Escuela de la School of Nursing. Es muy importante, por favor, que elijan su botón de interpretación, vayan a la parte de interpretación, el mundito que está abajo, hay un globito que dice interpretación y elijan español si hablan español. This is very important to check if you, if, we are going to have simultaneous interpretation from Spanish to English and English to Spanish. So please go to the interpretation button at the lower part of the screen. And if you are on the phone, you can choose more and it will let you choose your language. So welcome again to Latin 19. And I'm going to give the floor, the space to Rosa González Garda, Maralis Mercado Emerson, who are going to be welcoming you to the Access for Immigrants and Ser Hispano celebration. Rosa?
Maralis is the one in charge here today.
Hello. So we're gonna go ahead and get started today. Again, if you need interpretation services, please choose the globe on the bottom. Si necesitan interpretación, por favor, lo escogen abajo. My name is Maralis Mercado Emerson, and I would like to welcome you to our 5th Access for Immigrants. I don't know about you, but that's really exciting for us. So if you can give us a round of applause, because that's a big deal. That means that for the last 5 years, we have gathered as a community with our participants, with providers, with educators, with community health workers to share information and resources that are very necessary. And so I'm really excited about the work that we've done, but I'm even more excited about that work that we're continuing to do and going to do in the future. So today, last year we had music, and this year we're changing it up a little bit. We have 2 amazing spoken word artists that are gonna share their talents with you today. The first one is Emily Escobedo Ramirez, and the second one is Alex Alfaro. Please, I hope I said that last name correctly. So Emily Escobedo Ramirez is a senior at Cedar Ridge High School and is enrolled in the International Baccalaureate program. She is the daughter of immigrants and has been vocal about the issues surrounding the Latino community and believes that by utilizing their voice, change can happen. It just takes a spark to set a difference. Emily plans on pursuing a career in the humanities area and frequently enjoys reading, writing, and hanging out with her dog. Alex Alfaro is a nationally recognized award-winning actor, writer, spoken word poet, solo performer, and teaching artist from Los Angeles, California. Prior to COVID-19, he was on a national tour with his autobiographical solo show entitled Wet, a documented journey, a story about what it means to be an American in every sense of the word, except on paper. Alex is a recipient of the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle 2018 Solo Performance of the Year Award for his work on Wet. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone included, please welcome Emily and Alex.
Can I start?
Go ahead, Emily.
Hi everyone. Yeah, that's me. I'm Emily. I felt like that dog part in my introduction is really, really important. So that's why it's there. Yeah, I'm a senior. I'm currently in my library by the boards, but I did write a poem. I'm not critically acclaimed and I don't have any awards, but I do like writing in my free time. And I made one that's called We Are the Future, Deal with It. And I'm going to start. It's a dream for students like me to accomplish our goals for our families. The necessity to repay for those who came from far away creates the drive for success that is underway and may just sound somewhat cliche. Yet in this country they call the greatest nation, they dehumanize this generation. We saw the beginning of redaction of driver's licenses, jobs, and similar actions made purposefully to limit us distractions. The beginning of the end of the commencement of pretend that those with darker skin and other languages should be condemned for not becoming the ideal image or blend. The obstacles for undocumented creates a negative environment cemented and limits the underrepresented. The babies, the nieces, the nephews, the sisters, brothers, and children's livelihoods are refused by those who fail to understand and disapprove that all we want to do is excel and bloom. We are not monsters nor criminals, neither aliens or prisoners. We are the future petitioners, the future lawyers, engineers, journalists, medical practitioners. We are the future lawmakers and musicians, the teachers, the electricians, politicians. We are the ones who will solve this mission. And plus, who are you to say that we are the problem of this nation? But without immigrants, you would waste away, as we are the workers, leaders, and population. All we ask is for the proper treatment of immigrants. We don't need to be belittled or stopped. We need to be supported at any cost. Do it for the children, the future generations, so they themselves won't face these limitations. Listen to us when we say, we are the future and we're here to stay. Thank you. The name behind my poem, I chose it because for so long, I have always been told that I can't really do much change because of my age, of my gender, of my limitations, of my background. And I think when I hear that they're just ignorant, that they can't understand that this future generation they call soft or not smart enough, we are eventually going to be the ones in power, and we have that power, and there's no reason to deny us of what we are going to do. And that's yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Emily. That was a beautiful piece. It touches on all of the same things that I talk about in my work. I have 3 pieces for you all today. I'll try to make them, I'll try to pace them because I know that we have interpreters. And the first one is about my name. Part of assimilating into the United States, is if you have a difficult name, oftentimes the name is going to get butchered, or it's going to get misunderstood, and so I got tired of it. And so this first piece is about my name. My name is Aner, not Anir or Anner or Einer or some other way to properly mispronounce it. It's Aner, spelled A-N-N-E-R. You've never heard of it? Well, that's because it's unique. The way that only the Mayan sun can kiss the peak of the pyramids when the morning speaks. Agnir, my father used to say in Spanish. You really have to push it in the back of your throat to properly get it, unlike the way your indigenous grandmother does it, because for her, Spanish is her second language. The anguish and the uniqueness of your name is the quickness with which people will mispronounce it. Friends and teachers won't get it. They'll ask you if you're foreign. Where are you from? Do you speak American? Come again? No, I mean, I get that Los Angeles is where you live. I mean, where is your family originally from? And see, I don't usually say Guatemala, land of giant trees and eternal spring. Guatemala, pillaged home of the Mayan tribe. Guatemala, fallen kingdom of the Cunuman and the Popol Vuh. Guatemala, birthplace of Agner Alexander Alfaro Siridanis, who came to these United States with his mother as an infant, a 3-month-old escuincla who never left California. So of course I speak perfect English. What the hell is your problema? See, I am a spelling bee master because I took the 2 letters from the name that my mother hated, the 3 letters from the name that my father negated. I put them together and made something beautiful for you to see yourself reflected in. But what about Aileen, my little best friend? When does my daughter get to begin? Dad, please don't leave me. Dad, come home to me. Come home for you. Come home for me. We deserve to live free, happy. When do I begin? When my breath stops and my corpse rots, till my spirit dies due to missed shots, till my friends speak my name over comfort chante lyrics and tequila shots. He was a good man, whether you knew him or not. So don't talk to me about a dream, because Martin Luther King had a dream and now he's dead. Because the Kunuman fought for a dream and now he's dead. Because I placed my faith in a fabricated dream and it filled my head with worry and dread, watching others live and get ahead while witnessing any chance of reform die instead. Thank you. My next piece is about the struggles of being undocumented. I came to this country when I was 3 months old. My mother was an unaccompanied minor that brought me here when she was herself only 15 years old. And I lived in the United States without legal documents for 30 plus years until DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was enacted back in 2012. When you're undocumented, your whole life is fragmented, frustrated, understated when I say that life is hard when you can't even get a library card. It's easier to gain a record with the police than to lease a car or finance, riding dirty without a driver's license. Getting pulled over can turn into a deportation incident, especially if racial profiling is the lens of intent. Good luck with housing, renting an apartment. They don't accept your matricula document as a legal form of ID. That may be you, but it's not real if it's not issued by the DMV. For that, you need 9 numbers from Social Security. For that, you need an alien number. Your humanity is under scrutiny when you try to open a bank account in hopes of starting credit history or at least be able to cash your check. And trusting your dreams to the US is your only direct deposit. How dare you turn over a profit? Who cares if you pay taxes? No entitlement to public benefits, plus traveling outside the country is prohibited. Hopping on a domestic flight, Greyhound or Amtrak comes with the risk that to your home, you may never come back. Thank you. And my last piece is about growing up in this country and experiencing the duality of assimilation and cultural disproportioning and losing yourself, but trying to gain yourself. So this is a piece that's called Cuando Era Niño. Cuando era niño, my dad used to have me read La Opinión. He was fired for giving una opinión. Llegó a casa derrotado, humillado, because even though he begged a pardon, a wetback who thinks should only tend to the garden. These forms of discrimination came in ciclos every ciclo, but it was our fault too for not picking up un solo libro. So preoccupied with receiving el mínimo that we forget that we come from lo máximo, pero les conviene porque nos temen. They rather we live in an internal inferno que ellos han creado. The Spaniards, our native tongues, robaron. The women violaron, the men mataron, the children were indoctrinados, and that's why we have forgotten that we are esclavos, but the clues are written in the pigment of my brown skin. But how do I decipher? Where do I begin? I have found the candado, pero si no encuentro the key, de nada ha servido what my people ha sacrificado. Mi nombre is Einer Alexander Alfaro Cividanis. I am an American in every sense of the word, except on paper. And what I am not is your enemy. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you. Can we come off of mute and let these amazing poets hear your applause and your praise, because they deserve it. That was most excellent.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Felicidades.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maralice. And as you pull up the slides, I just want to share how moved I am by Emily and Einer. the topics that you share through your art are things that we've been talking about a lot here in Latin 19, and our research team, Serifano, has been trying to address and just put it in such a powerful and eloquent way that I hope that you will continue to partner with us as we try to make an impact in really what is this whole area of acculturative stress that we're going to be talking a lot more about in the research that we've been doing here. That looks good. And Manalis, I think we're not seeing it in presenter mode. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for giving us the opportunity for our team, our Serifano research team, to share our findings of a study that's been ongoing for the last 5 years. This is a study that is really focused on stress and acculturative stress. And I think the issues that Emily and Anna talked about through their art are really issues that are of focus here in our team. And we're also have a focus on trying to understand resilience, our community's ability to resist, rebound, and recover even amidst a lot of this stress, this toxic stress that we started thinking about earlier. This is a study that's funded through the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, and I just want to highlight our awesome team. Many of you know these people. They've been very active members of Latin 19. We have expertise from La Comunidad, from our local community, as well as national experts that are joining us today, and you'll be hearing more about. We also have an incredible staff of people that have really made this work be successful. We've had the opportunity to work with many leaders in our community and also in our Duke community that have come in and out of the study and have had made a major impact in the work that we've carried out. And we've also had the opportunity to work with a number of trainees. Many of them you are familiar with also, who've been part of Latin 19. These are trainees across different disciplines, from undergraduate individuals, people that are getting a PhD, and even after. And we had the opportunity to work with 10 wonderful women, promotoras from El Centro Hispano. And during the pandemic, our team had to shift, of course, like everyone else. And we also started to do some work in COVID-19. And with the help of these promotoras, we were able to develop a project that Irene is going to share a little bit more about later on. So the main problem that our team is focused on is trying to understand why is it that Latino immigrants are healthier when they first get to this country and why their health declines over time. Many of you know this, but for some people it's a surprise that Latinx immigrants are healthier when they first arrive to this country, and they're healthier than their US born counterparts. But the sad news here is that that health advantage declines over time. And we know that it is those things that Emily and Alex talked about that's in our environment that really contributes to that toxic stress that leads to the decline in health over time. So our team takes on a syndemic approach, what I'll tell you about, but our main study question here that we've been engaged in is really to try to understand how does acculturative stress, that stress of being a Latino immigrant here in the United States and adapting to this culture and context and the experiences involved in that, and resilience, the ability of the Latino immigrant community to rebound, resist, and recover from that stress. How do those things come together and influence health over time? And not only our physical and mental health, but how does that get under the skin and become part of our biology? So we take on this syndemic approach. A syndemic is co-occurring epidemics that cluster in historically marginalized communities. And we've been looking at this particular syndemic, which is the syndemic of intimate partner violence, substance abuse, HIV, and mental health problems like depression and anxiety. And we know these things become worse for Latino immigrants over time and in response to stress. We, for the first time now, are looking at biological stress as well as part of this endemic and trying to understand how resilience, how the roots of our community really protect us. And those are the things that we've been looking at: strong family and social support, ethnic pride, how proud we are to be Latinos, Cubanos, Chilenos, Puerto Ricanos, etc., Guatemaltecas, and the optimism that we have in our life for ourselves and for our families. How does that contribute to health? And we know that just very much like a tree, despite the opportunities or despite our environment where we experience harsh winds and sometimes storms that are a result of racism and xenophobia that manifest in stress. Despite this context that we live, there's an opportunity for our trees to get stronger through these resilience roots. So just to share, of course, we've been also adding on COVID as part of this endemic. So just to share some of our findings, this is what our community participants look like. We have 391 participants, and you'll see here that the majority prefer to speak Spanish. Unfortunately, the majority of our participants don't have health insurance. About a third have a medical condition, and about a third are also undocumented. And we were able to find that our community participants have a large number of resilience factors, such as strong family and social support. There's a high sense of ethnic and cultural pride. But unfortunately, we also see that there are several behavioral and mental health conditions that are higher in our participants than in the general population, such as binge drinking, depression, experiences of intimate partner violence or domestic violence, and then anxiety and depression. And we were able to find that this is in fact a endemic, meaning that intimate partner violence, substance abuse, depression, and anxiety coexist in our community. Unlike in the past, HIV was not part of this endemic, and we think because this is because in our sample, we had low rates of risk behaviors related to HIV. And the top 3 stressors that are related to acculturative stress that we have found that makes an impact are things related to our family, marital stress within the context of acculturation and acculturative stress, family stress, and then stress related to our economic and occupational status. And then the 3 most important things that we've found in terms of sources of resilience have been, if you could click Maralis, is ethnic pride, how proud we are of our culture and ethnicity, our individual level resilience, and our ability to cope in an active way amidst this stress. So now I'll hand it off to another leader in our team, Allison Stafford, who's going to share some of her work leading the parts of this study related to physical health outcomes. Allison?
Thanks, Rosa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Allison Stafford. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Nursing at Duke, and have been working with the Hispano Team for almost 4 years now. And I'm going to be talking about a project that I led with Dr. Irene Felsman and Gabby Nagy, looking at the impact of the U.S. immigration climate on the physical health outcomes of the participants in the Hispano study. This was funded through Basque Connections, which is a funding mechanism at Duke, where we were able to involve some amazing graduate and undergraduate students, as well as interdisciplinary collaborators to really focus in on this topic. So a little bit of the background, as we heard this morning in the poetry, obviously right now there's been just a really hostile climate in the last several years towards immigrants in the US, and members of the Latina community in particular have been targeted by rhetoric of the Trump administration, policies regarding immigrations and customs enforcement at the US-Mexico border, And there've been a lot of responses to this. Some have resulted in support, such as, showings of rallies and things like that in support of immigrants, but others have responded with more xenophobia, discrimination, and racism towards immigrants in the US. And what we've seen is that this has had both negative impacts on physical health and mental health of Latino immigrants in the US. And so our team was really interested in understanding in particular why immigrants who are undocumented report worse physical health than those who are documented. Marilis, you can go to the next slide. So what we did an analysis looking at trying to figure out different reasons why undocumented immigrants in the Ser Hispano study would have worse physical health than those who are documented. And what we found is that individuals who are undocumented reported more immigration stress. So they had immigration stress related to fearing deportation, not being able to access services in the community because they didn't have a driver's license, not being able to get work authorization. And so that immigration stress also led to higher levels of healthcare stress. So not accessing health services when they were needed. And then that in turn led to worse self-reported physical health. So what we see here is that it's kind of both that, the biological stress we think that comes from worrying about your immigration status, but then also, not wanting to expose yourself by seeking health services to a system that might, have negative implications then for your status in the US. And then Marilis, you can switch to the next slide. And so this has then several important policy and community implications. So we purposefully had experts on our team that represented immigration law and community advocacy to kind of help weigh in on this. And what, from a healthcare perspective, thinking about where undocumented immigrants access health services, which is often at federally qualified health centers. So thinking about how we can expand funding in those areas so that undocumented immigrants can have more access to health services when they need it, as well as funding for community health workers so that these individuals have access to linguistically and culturally sensitive health services, as well as just advocating for policies that will expand access to health services for immigrants. And then in terms of immigration reform, the Biden administration, has unfulfilled promises so far about expanding pathways to citizenship for immigrants. So continuing to advocate for those changes, as well as ensuring that immigrant families have access to low-cost, free legal resources in the community setting. And then on the community level, in addition to advocating for these different policy level changes, ensuring that we have programs and resources available to help individuals cope with the different stressors. And I'm really excited for the rest of our team to talk about the work that we've done in this area. If you have any questions, I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to talk more about this project, but I will pass it along so you can hear about some more exciting findings from our team.
Thanks, Allison. I'm Brian McCabe. I'm joining you from Auburn University in Alabama, all physically in Durham today. I'm going to talk a little bit about drinking, so I hope you're up for that. I have a question. How many Latinos get drunk once a month, would you guess? So hopefully your silence means you're a little concerned about that term drunk, which is a bit vague. And so we can use a more specific term like binge drinking or heavy episodic drinking. And that means five or more standard drinks for men or 4 or more for women. That's the number of drinks it would take to get an average sized person past the legal limit for driving. So with that definition in mind, any guesses how many Latinos are heavy drinking within a month? So the quiz is ruined. It's about 30% for 18 to 25-year-olds and about 25% for 26 or more, people that are 26 or older. Next question. how does that compare to Anglos? Any guesses for that one? More or less? So it's actually less for the 18 to 25-year-olds. So Anglos, it's about 40% binge drinking in a month. It's about the same for 26 years old or older. The problem here is that even though the Latinos aren't drinking more, they still have more and worse consequences. So they have arrests and legal problems more. They have more injuries, more violence. They even have health problems, including dying from cirrhosis of the liver. There's also, even though they're drinking the same, they are less in many cases. They have about the same rates of alcohol use disorders or alcoholism, in other words. This is a problem because there's disparities in treatment as well. So if you can find treatment in Spanish that's designed for Latinos, there are few interventions that are just kind of basically direct translations, and there are even fewer treatments for immigrants from Latin America. So to find out how to make treatments for immigrants, we asked whether there were immigration experiences related to heavy drinking. So on the next slide, I'll show you the constructs we looked at. We looked at acculturation, which is adopting American cultural patterns. We looked at enculturation, which is maintaining heritage Latino or Hispanic cultural practices. We also looked at familism, so that's valuing the importance of family over the individual, and cultural identity, like having good feelings about your own ethnic group. And then we also looked at acculturative stress, which Rosa and Allison mentioned earlier. We found two things. If we advance a little, Marlies, we found acculturative stress and acculturation to the US are both related to heavy drinking. So specifically, the more stress people had, the more drinking, and the more American practices, the more drinking they had. So next question, what about treatment? What do we do with treatment? One possibility is that Latinos are drinking as stress relief. And so treatment could build in healthier ways to cope with acculturative stress. Coming up, I believe some presenters are going to talk about different ways to look at coping or help people develop healthy coping strategies. Another possibility is that immigrants are adopting unhealthy American beliefs and expectations about drinking. So treatment then could change those beliefs, either by encouraging connection to healthy aspects of Latino culture, or by providing more accurate information about drinking rates and so on. There are some treatments that do exist that do that provide corrective information with accurate information, designed for college students that could be easily adapted for younger Latin American immigrants. If you recall, at the very beginning, I asked some questions about how much people drink and what the comparisons are to Anglos. That's sort of what those treatments look like, except there's a lot more information and it's more personal to the person. So as you can probably imagine, people that are drinking heavily generally vastly overestimate how much the average person drinks and how much other people drink in general, or how much acceptability there is for drinking. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Before we move on, if you've just come on the call, welcome. We have interpretation services available. If you would please go to the globe at the bottom of your screen on your right-hand side and choose whether you would like to listen in English or in Spanish, so that you can get the interpretation that you need. Si necesitan servicios de interpretación, por favor, le hagan clic al globo que está a su mano derecha abajo y escoger el español. And now Dr. J.P. Cao.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm J.P. and I'm just, I will be graduating this May, so I have been working with a team has a focus on intimate partner violence. So one important part in the syndemic tree. And so today the question I'm interested in, we have explored is what are the impact of acculturative stress and life course adversities on intimate partner violence among Latinx immigrants. So when we talked about acculturative stress, we already know that marital stress and family stress are a big part among all different types of acculturative stress. And for life course adversities, we are talking about acculturation and also adverse childhood experiences people experience before the age of 18. Next, please. So for our study, we found out that before we get to the results, I would like to provide some general information. So among our participants, there are about 50% of them has both experienced intimate partner violence and also perpetrate intimate partner violence towards their partners. And there are about 30% of our participants who have never experienced or never perpetrate violence towards their partners. So with that in mind, like our study further reveals that family stress remains the strongest predictor for violence for Latinx immigrants' experience of intimate partner violence. And we're thinking that the family stress actually refers to the stress associated with the inability to prioritize the needs of the family member. So people lost the protective effects of the feminism. So that's why we think family stress stands out as a risk factor for intimate partner violence victimization. And as for adverse childhood experiences, we found out that it is linked to higher risk of perpetrate violence towards partners. Next, please. So with this information, what are our next steps? We would argue that as the adversities and stress seem to contribute to intimate partner violence, and behaviors focused on this addressing minimize exposure to adversities and also manage stress would be very helpful. And these interventions should also have a focus or help Latinx immigrants have a better adaptation to the US. And I think Gabby will have a more detailed discussion on intervention on acculturative stress.
Thanks, J-Pin. Yes, I am Gabriella Nagy. A lot of people call me Gabby, and I'm faculty in psychiatry at Duke primarily. And I am going to be talking to you about different intervention approaches that our team has been thinking about. So in order to know how to intervene, a lot of the work that we have done in the last few years has been on trying to understand the different types of stressors and different types of resilience factors, because we want to know how to dampen those stressors, and we want to know how to increase that resilience so that we can help people navigate this process of immigration and adaptation a little bit better. So through lots of different projects, we have been able to identify that stress happens, but it is in tandem with resilience factors before, during, and after migration. So for example, before migration, many of our participants may be experiencing financial strain in their home countries, maybe lack of educational and occupational opportunities, maybe neighborhood violence or violence in their home. And those may be some of the reasons why they make the very difficult choice of leaving their home and going to a new country. But at the same time, there are some really protective factors that are happening, right? Such as strong connections to their family, maybe strong connections to their community, healthier foods, more fresh fruits and vegetables, healthier lifestyles in terms of having less sedentary lifestyle, those kinds of things. And then comes the migration journey. And there can be stressors there, such as family separation and having to leave your community and really very important people in your life behind. Sometimes traumatic journeys, depending on how it is that you were able to make that journey here. But at the same time, the optimism that you have about a new life really can carry you, as well as the solidarity that you might feel with the people that you are traveling with. And after migration, a lot of our participants have talked about the grief and the loneliness that they feel really being in the margins of society and having left everything that they've known in their home countries. They also talk about the simultaneous pressure to both maintain their Latin roots and maintain their culture and their language and their traditions, at the same time feeling pressure to have to adapt to American life, especially when we talk about parents and children who often are acculturating at different rates, right? Where children oftentimes are having a lot of pressure to fit in and to become quote unquote more American, whereas parents may really want them to retain more of their cultural roots. And at the same time, there are some resilience factors that are happening at that level. Some of our participants have talked about coming here and having more access to food, having more security, having better opportunities for their children. And so the key point that we want to highlight is that often there is a one narrative story about immigration being just this really negative, stressful thing. But really what we also want to highlight is that our community has so much resilience and strength through that whole journey. And we really want to focus on how do we actually beef that up and help them retain that during this process. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just pull some key themes. We've done some interviews with our community partners as well as community sites. We've done some quantitative analyses on the data that some of my colleagues have been talking about. We've worked with our community sites to do observations of different places. And here are some major things that have come up in terms of us thinking about how do we intervene and what do we do actually to help our community with the stress and the resilience. So the first thing is that acculturative stress is very common. We hear about it all the time. However, it looks very different across people. And that really depends on the country that people came, the age at which they came, different identities that they might have in terms of their race, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their documentation status, their socioeconomic status, all of those things. The second key finding is that community members experience significant distress from that acculturative stress, and they note that it really does impact both their physical health and their mental health, okay? We also have heard that many people in our community would like to receive professional support to manage that stress in the form of things like psychotherapy and medications or other formal services. And yet they face a lot of barriers to access. So things like very long waitlist times to get into those services, or maybe high cost of services, or not having enough insurance coverage to actually be able to get those. In addition to stigma that oftentimes does come from the community itself. So people having the idea that you have to be local or crazy to even get to psychotherapy. And we've also asked a lot of questions in terms of like, what would people like? What would be helpful to support their health? And so we heard a lot about people wanting groups so that they can connect with other members of the community and reduce that isolation. We heard about the importance of having the interventions that we deliver both by professionals in mental health, but also members of the community, specifically community health workers, because they each have unique skill sets and experiences that together are really, really powerful. We also heard the importance of focusing on skills and tangible strategies that people can apply to reduce that stress, not only having a place to just talk about what's stressful, but actually learn things so that they can manage those stressful experiences better. And then lastly, having some intervention components focused on navigating complex systems like the healthcare system, the legal system, the education system, those sorts of things. Our team has been involved in different interventions. The first is the Cultivando Fortaleza intervention, which is an 8-session coping skills group for Latinx adults. And right now that's being led by mental health care professionals, but we are adapting it to be led by community health workers eventually. The Ser Comunidad intervention, which is a 4-session health promotion intervention, and my colleague, Dr. Irene Felsman, is going to talk about it next. And that was developed and will be led by community health workers. And lastly, our team is collaborating with Dr. Eve Puffer to adapt the Coping Together intervention, which is an 8-session family coping skills intervention. And that is led by community health workers. Next slide. Not sure if that's the last one or not. Okay, yep. So the takeaway from all of this is that we have been really productive in trying to develop things that can make an impact, and they're really promising. We're getting some good initial results, and so we are really excited that in the future, the things that we're developing can make a significant impact on the health of the community. And we're also thinking very strategically around how do we develop things now that can be sustainable in the long term and can have wide reach, not just in the Research Triangle area, but on a national scale. So thank you so much, and I will pass it over to Dr. Irene Felsman.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for that great stage setting, Gabby. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Sarah, whoops, something went backwards. Can you please move forward again? Thank you. It has this fancy little fadey thing on it. Okay, so Gabby talked about Ser Comunidad, which is one of our interventions that we have actually done in the community already. And as she said, we worked with health promoters, with promotoras or CHWs to develop this program. So the way we did that is we came up with a basic design for an intervention working with community members. And then we spent a fair amount of time piloting that or working with them about what the best topics were and how we should approach it. So I won't go into a lot of that. If you want to know more about how we managed to develop this, you can contact me. I know we're a little bit short on time. So, but our promotores were then trained doing research training and trained in techniques for working with individuals and groups and in identifying community resources. After that, we identified 30 Latino immigrants from our original study who were willing to be part of this pilot program to participate in those 4 sessions. And we asked them a lot of questions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that next, about their health and their stress and all kinds of other things, which I'll go over in more detail next. Then we had a 4-session intervention, which Gabby talked about as well. 2 of them were one-on-one sessions. So they met with an individual health promoter or a community health worker to talk about what the results of their surveys were and what their particular individual issues were around stress and health and family. And then we had 2 group sessions where we brought those individuals together in groups of 10. And they could talk then amongst themselves about social supports and interaction, identifying community support and resources. So it was a combined intervention of individual and group sessions. So some of the strategies that we used in those sessions were using motivational interviewing techniques, which basically help individuals figure out what's important for them and what motivates them to change their behaviors to make their health better. We used health coaching in a group session, so making goals as a group or helping each other identify resources, share experiences. We used guided visualization and breathing techniques. So in the group session, mainly, we would open the sessions with some breathing techniques for reducing stress, doing some visualization where you think about putting yourself in a calm setting and how that might help you reduce your stress, things like that. Those are the kinds of techniques that we used. And then we used the group to kind of identify resources in the community that have been helpful to them. So I'm going a little bit quickly because I know we're short on time, and I will take any kinds of questions. Okay, so here's what we found. when we looked at our program and what the effect of our program was. We found that it lowered signs of depression in the group of 30 that we worked with, that it lowered their stress levels, and it lowered their COVID risk behaviors, meaning they learned how to be safer in their families and in their communities. So what sort of stayed the same was that emotional support within their families seemed to stay the same. Instrumental support is basically things like money and food and help from the communities, things like that. Their COVID knowledge, in other words, what they knew about COVID and how it spread, stayed about the same. And then stress levels around the pandemic stayed the same, which I think they did for probably all of us. And here's a few quotes. We also did an exit interview where we talked with about 10 women who were part of this group. And they told us a few things about how they felt about the group. One was that the program helped them make decisions they never made before. Some said that all Hispanics should know about this, know about stress and how to lower it. And one woman said she really liked the group because she realized that there were others that had similar issues and problems, and it helped her to talk with other people who had the same difficulties that she did around COVID and other things as well. So next slide. So what does all this mean, all this research and these interventions? And here's that lovely picture of our fantastic community promotoras. So we found that a promotora-led intervention or a CHW-led intervention can really address COVID risk behaviors and the related health disparities. And it's feasible, it's accessible, it's a good alternative to lowering acculturative stress, and it can address some mental health issues at the community level, as Gabby was saying. It increases health literacy in general for community members, and people are really accept this as an intervention, as a community or a group intervention. It's culturally appropriate and it's relatively low cost, and we hope that it can be scalable intervention. So this gives you just one example of how we're working on trying to develop interventions based on our research. And I'll stop there. So I'll put my email address in the chat as well. At least I hope I helped you catch up on time.
Thank you, Irene. My name is Richard Cervantes. I'm part of the Ser Hispano Research Study Team, one of the co-investigators. I'm formerly on faculty at the University of Southern California and located in Los Angeles. Today, I'm actually here in Durham, North Carolina. So it's good to be here with all of you. My work for the last, as you can see, I have many gray hairs, but my work in the past has been around issues related to acculturation stress, mental health, substance abuse, and measurement, trying to measure these things. As a psychologist, by training, that's sort of my expertise, is in looking at measurement issues. So one of the contributions that I think we're making here from the Ser Hispano study is to look at, as my colleagues have mentioned, resilience. Resilience, and then specifically optimism. We thought early on that optimism would be an important aspect of how Latino immigrants maintain their faith and hope and maintain their mental health and reduce substance abuse risk, that the optimism is a very important concept. I'm going to go through this presentation kind of rapidly, and there's some detail, but we'll try to look at the big picture. When we think about Latino immigrants, we oftentimes think about the concept of the American dream. And whether you believe in that concept or not, there are many immigrants that in fact come here to try to achieve that American dream. So it is the belief that there's an opportunity for individual and family prosperity through hard work. Optimism in the American dream can also represent an important source of resilience for Latino immigrants to the US. And optimism is defined generally as the relative stable tendency to expect good outcomes in life. So people, we all know people that expect great things in life, where we always have a positive attitude, we expect good outcomes. And this is what we mean by optimism. And it is related to other similar traits of hope and faith. Optimistic individuals have better coping strategies and are more resilient to stress. Among immigrants to the US, a primary motivation for immigrating from one's country of origin may be partly due to the expectation that by coming here, you'll be closer to reaching that American dream. So with that concept in mind, if we can go to the next slide, the purpose of this part of the Ser Hispano study was to develop a new test, a new measure that can be used by counselors, psychologists, educators, researchers, and we call it the Hispanic Optimism and Personal Expectancy Tool, or the HOPE measure. We did 2 phases to develop the measure. First, we did a bunch of focus groups and interviewed people. And from those interviews on the American Dream, we were able to develop 24 questions. And then in the phase 2, with the data that was collected here in the Research Triangle area, we were able to do and develop a final set of 18 items. We used a variety of different psychometric or psychometric testing procedures, exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis. And here's the sort of the important part of this sub-study. Number one is that we've been able to validate this area of optimism called hope for a better life. The second area that we were able to validate is a measure of hope for freedom and security, and finally, hope for economic opportunity. Let me just talk for just 1 minute about what these things mean, because I don't have the actual questions in this PowerPoint, but I do have them on my screen. So hope for a better life. What does that mean? Basically, it's the idea that immigrants feel that by coming to the US, they're helping their family. Not only the familia here in the US that's with them, but also being able to help the family in the home country. Very important. Also, the concept that we're going to have that Latinos or that families will have a better financial condition here in the US, more family stability, and a better life for children and grandchildren. So that's kind of the concept of the better life. In terms of freedom and security, our participants endorsed questions like they would have more family tranquility, greater religious freedom, better personal security, and the ability to reunite with people here in the US. That we sort of clumped into what we call freedom and security. And finally, economic opportunity. That's a big part of the sort of the hope measures, the ability to measure the perceptions that if you come to the US and you have this high optimism, you also feel that you're going to be able to increase your financial situation, be able to retire, save money, buy a home, live and work more comfortably, to pay for a good education, and all of those things help cope with some legal status issues. So taken together, the hope measure gets at these 3 factors, these 3 areas of optimism that we now feel we can measure in immigrant samples, immigrant populations, and that this is an important source of resiliency, personal and family resilience. The higher the hope, the higher the optimism, the better off we are in terms of our substance abuse and mental health risk. If we can go to the next slide, this is some more just sort of the details on the testing part of it, the validity. I think that the third and fourth bullet here, the test scores were significantly correlated with a strong sense of familism or familismo and a strong sense of Americanism and ethnic pride. Interestingly, in this sample, there was no relationship between our optimism measure and either depression or anxiety. So that was a little bit interesting. And we may want to go back and look at some of that data to find out why is it that optimism in this study does not seem to be relating to either depression or anxiety.
Richard, you have
La-
two questions. One
Yes.
is, have you published the hope scale?
We are in the process of publishing the whole scale. Yes, we have an article that's under review right now.
Okay. And Humberto has a question for you, I believe. Humberto?
Sí, mi pregunta es, sí me enteré de estos estudios que hicieron con el Ser Comunidad y me da mucho gusto que nos hayan incluido en estos planes de ustedes como promotores de salud. Mi pregunta es, ¿la Universidad de Duke o Duke ha pensado en alguna clínica a bajo costo o gratuita para la comunidad? Ya que en este momento solamente tenemos el futuro. El futuro está totalmente lleno, está sobrepoblado y me gustaría mucho que la Universidad de Duke invirtiera en la comunidad latina en alguna clínica a bajo costo o gratuita, ya que así se maneja también el futuro, la clínica del futuro. Y como andamos como yo, promotor de salud, y muchos compañeros que somos promotores de salud, andamos en la calle y encontramos mucha gente. Ahorita hay demasiada gente que necesita mucha ayuda.
Okay. Gracias, Humberto. Un momentito y le contestamos la pregunta.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Richard,
Thank you, Humberto.
and I don't know if Richard, well, that's a due question, but I know that, Richard, you were talking about that briefly.
Right. Let's put that. I think that's an excellent question, and certainly something that I want to make sure that we answer, but I want to put it in the parking lot so that our principal investigator, Rosa, and some of the other team can help me answer that. Right now, I know we're in the process of developing more grant funding to do community level interventions that would include some aspect of providing those low cost services that you mentioned. But I'm going to put that question in the parking lot, if you will, on hold. And at the end of my presentation, or at the end of all of our presentations, we can come back and address that. So in summary, on the optimism issue, so optimism in the American dream, it is a valid and reliable measurement construct for Latino immigrants. I think that's important. One of the things that for me in the last 20 years, 25 years is there are so few measures, psychological tests that are available that were developed by and for Latinos. So having a new measure of resilience that we call optimism is very important. And we've shown that it's valid and reliable. Secondly, measuring optimism is important in future studies of immigrant health and mental health, and it may help us better understand the concept, or better understand the immigrant paradox that Dr. Gonzalez mentioned at the beginning. Community health workers, promotores, and clinicians should consider assessing and developing strategies to encourage optimism among Latino immigrants. So if we know that that there are these different aspects of optimism that people have a sense about, that we can certainly promote those things in our healthcare settings. The impact of affirming this optimism among immigrant populations in future prevention or treatment settings is in need of more study. So we don't want to say for sure that this isn't going to be effective in reducing depression or reducing anxiety, but it seems to be an important area of resilience to keep people sort of in a healthy way, healthy lifestyle. So more research on this optimism concept is certainly needed. I'm going to end the presentation by thanking all of you and thanking the School of Nursing for allowing this presentation. Thank you very much, Marilise.
Excellent. And last but not least, we have Pilar.
Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I don't have a presentation, a slideshow, but Pilar Roche Goldberg. I'm the president and CEO of El Centro Hispano and one of the co-investigators for this research study that has been very important for the community because we know how the stress affects the community, immigration, all of that. But I think it's important for the community itself to understand in another way what is happening and how we can advance and get out of these situations we feel, or sometimes we think it's nothing, yes? And we should continue, as it was clear in the presentation from the researchers. So it's important for the community to understand that, but then for everybody to see what are the interventions and the programs that need to be out of the community. And I think that's the relationship we always need to understand between research and programs to the community, organizations, CBOs that participate on it. And also I need to applaud the team and Rosa, the leader, because from the beginning, they understood the importance of bringing the community into this, not just for participants to the study, but to develop the program, the interventions, the questions, bringing the community health workers and people from the community to really understand how to do this and work with the community. Because I think it is the way, as I said before, we can develop programs and translate this research into practical things that will help our community. And you saw it with Ser Comunidad. So I really think this is also another part is letting the community know the results of the study. Yes, so it's something that we are doing today. I think is really important. So thank you, everybody. And I think this, and I know we want to continue doing more of this and studying more of this. And again, because I've been in both parts of the creation. Yes, I worked at Duke at the beginning doing research, and when I came to live in this country, and I hear the struggles of the community when you hear the word research and how you feel about it. But then this is helping us to really understand the importance of research, but also the translation to this research to programs and services to the community.
Thank you, Pilar. There are questions that are happening in the chat, and there are some conversations. I know that some folks are going to have to leave. For the sake of time, we're going to roll into our next session, but we have a few minutes for some questions, literally a few, for questions to be answered. And I know that Laura Villa Torres, this one is for Richard. Have you thought about incorporating transnationalism in the Hope scale? Have you?
And I answered that, Maralisa, in the chat, but I'm happy to reiterate. I think measuring optimism in people that are planning to migrate to the US or other countries is would be a very, very important study, especially now, given the worldwide conditions and what we're seeing in Ukraine and other countries in that region. There's a tremendous amount of transnational migration and refugees right now. And so this concept of optimism may play a very important role. But if any of you are doing that transnational work, I'd love to speak more with you.
Excellent. Are there any other questions?
And Maralisa, if we have time, I think we have 3 minutes before our panel with the community health workers that Rosa Solórzano is going to lead. I do want to get back to Humberto's question about just, advocating for Duke to provide more mental health. And I know Gabby Nagy has done a lot of that advocacy in her department. So I would love to hear from her in a minute. What we're doing in our team is we're really trying, we've learned so much from this work, and we're really working hard to translate that into programs. And we're trying to create the evidence that the programs work, and hoping to use that evidence to advocate for investments, for more sustainable programs in the community that are accessible, that are really within reach, that could address mental health. And one of the ways, right now that's happening is that, as you know, we talked about a few weeks ago, that El Futuro is doing more work now to do training around. They just got some funding from Duke to do more training around, to give the community health workers more tools to be able to address mental health. So that's up and coming. You'll hear more about that. And then you saw that in our team, we're trying to do the piloting of those interventions in the community, trying to figure out both like more intensive mental health services and then less intensive that can be delivered in the community. So I would love to just hear from Gabby's perspective and her advocacy to expand access to mental health.
Well, I just wanted to thank Humberto for raising this and for really sort of highlighting this, because I think that this has been one of the largest struggles that we've had, is trying to think about how do we give services to a larger group of people, knowing that there's so many barriers to entry into the mental health care system, and knowing that the key players that are providing really good services like El Futuro are getting just a flood of people coming to them, because systems like Duke maybe don't have the capacity, to share some of responsibility of meeting the needs. So I don't have any answers for you today, except to say that this is definitely something we're thinking a lot about, and something that we're committed to continuing to advocate at the health system, and marrying that with trying to think about how do we make our health systems more inclusive and more welcoming to members of the community. So having, my chart in Spanish, making sure that signs are in Spanish, making sure that there's more forms and things that are culturally and linguistically appropriate for the community. So yeah, lots of work yet to do, but thank you for bringing this up.
Ok, bueno, buenas tardes. Vamos a cambiar de canal y vamos a hacer esta parte en español. O sea que por favor asegúrense de cambiar o de escoger su idioma, ya sea español o inglés, o los bilingües o Spanglish. Lo pueden dejar así nomás y nos entendemos. Bueno, buenas tardes. Yo soy la doctora Rosa Solórzano, trabajo en la Escuela de Enfermería de Duke y he estado en el proyecto Ser Hispano desde su comienzo, desde hace 5 años. Esta tarde vamos a enfocarnos a la comunidad. Nuestro panel es Entre familias, trabajadores comunitarios de salud, cambiando la narrativa. Entonces tenemos el gusto de tener a 3 representantes de la comunidad. Vamos a tener a Beatriz López del Centro Hispano, a Iván Almonte de La Semilla y a Alex Córdoba de Lila de Initiative Latin LGBTQ and Plus. Okay. Entonces, muchas gracias por participar esta tarde con nosotros. Vamos a tener 45 minutos juntos y vamos a tener algunas preguntas un poco dirigidas a los participantes, a los 3 participantes, con oportunidad para la comunidad de hacer preguntas al final de nuestra discusión. Entonces, hola, bienvenidos Beatriz, Iván y Alex. No los veo, vamos a tratar de encontrarlos los 3. Ok, perfecto, aquí ya los tenemos. Estamos muy contentos de tenerlos a ustedes como representantes de la comunidad. Y hemos aprendido y repasado mucho hoy en nuestra presentación de Ser Hispano con el concepto de estrés aculturativo o el estrés de nuestra aculturación. ¿Qué significa? Como ya nos explicaron, todo ese estrés que nos ha dado en este proceso migratorio o vivir nosotros aquí en esta nueva comunidad, para nosotros, en esta nueva cultura, para nosotros como inmigrantes. Más en este tiempo, desde que hemos estado aquí como inmigrantes y sobre todo en estos últimos 2 años donde hemos tenido que enfrentarnos a muchos estresores como la pandemia, los cambios económicos, las amenazas políticas, cambios políticos, y nos ha presentado con mucho más de estos estresores, pero también hemos visto ese surgimiento y ese empoderamiento de ustedes como trabajadores comunitarios. Entonces, hoy queremos hablar sobre esos conceptos y entender un poco sobre este estrés aculturativo, tanto en sus comunidades, en sus roles como trabajadores comunitarios y en sus vidas personales. Entonces, voy a empezar con la primera pregunta. La primera pregunta sería para Beatriz, perdón, quisiera antes de empezar, quiero que se presenten un poco, un minuto de quiénes son ustedes y cuál es su rol y tanto o algo que queramos también conocer de ustedes como personas. Entonces, Beatriz.
Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Beatriz Vázquez. Por el momento, actualmente promotora de salud del Centro Hispano. Anteriormente o antes de todo esto, he sido voluntaria en la comunidad, en todo lo que he podido apoyar. Soy mamá, tengo 5 hijos. Por lo cual es mi motivo y fue mi impulso a estar siendo una guía allá afuera, buscando ayuda, buscando soporte, porque en mi misma casa está la necesidad, ¿verdad? Empezamos por casa y pues todo eso me ha motivado a seguir todo este tiempo, a seguir apoyando en mi comunidad, bendecida con la participación de ser comunidad. No puedo creer que eso fue hace 3 años que empezamos aquí. Eso sería un poquito de mí. Soy de México, perdón, soy mexicana, soy de Veracruz, México. Tengo 23 años en el país y, y orgullosa de participar aquí, conocer a tanta gente hermosa que nos ha enseñado tanto en mi persona. Gracias.
Gracias, Beatriz. Iván.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Iván Almonte. Actualmente estoy trabajando en La Semilla, Iglesia La Semilla, aquí en Durham, como capitán de trabajadores comunitarios de la salud. Pues también antes de entrar a La Semilla, pues ya tenía mucho tiempo abogando por la comunidad como organizador comunitario por más de 20 años aquí en el estado, pero también en el sur. Tengo mucha experiencia abogando por familias en proceso de deportación, visitando varios centros de detención a nivel federal, y pues en Durham hubo muchas familias que pudieron ser libres gracias al apoyo que les brindé junto con otras amistades. Entonces, y pues es un placer seguir trabajando en la comunidad más vulnerable, más marginalizada, por el simple hecho de ser inmigrante. Pues estamos al final de la línea en cuanto a recursos, así es que es un placer poder compartir un poco más con ustedes. Gracias.
Gracias, Iván. Alex.
Muy buenas tardes, yo soy Alex Córdoba. Yo trabajo para Lila LGBT, salvadoreño de origen, 32 años en los Estados Unidos. Yo me inicié trabajando con las comunidades en San Francisco, viví 15 años en San Francisco, California. Llegué hace 17 años aquí al Triángulo. Hemos trabajado en con diferentes grupos sociales aquí, pero siempre con la comunidad. Nos hemos encontrado en diferentes organizaciones para hacer equipo. Soy un apasionado de mi comunidad. Me movió mucho Alex con su poema, todo lo que ha pasado para que estemos este día aquí como inmigrantes. Todo el proceso que hemos tenido nosotros. Ha sido bien difícil, pero estamos aquí para ayudar a otros. ¿Qué puedo decir? Soy un hombre, creamos Lila en el 2017, un grupo de líderes latinos LGBT, y ahora con la pandemia, pues, hemos trabajado juntos de la mano, unos con otros, sin decir somos LGBT, sino que nos hemos integrado. Creo que la experiencia de haber trabajado 30 años con HIV nos ha dado la pauta y la facilidad de poder decir, tenemos otra pandemia y vamos a trabajar unidos. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Alex. Muy bien, entonces vamos a empezar con la primera pregunta. La voy a poner aquí en el chat y es para Beatriz. Beatriz, tú trabajaste con Ser Comunidad, fuiste una de las primeras seleccionadas para ser entrenada y luego para repartir esas sesiones de Ser Comunidad. ¿Cómo participación en esta investigación te impactó en tu vida personal y en tu trabajo como promotora de la salud para enfrentar esos estreses de aculturación?
Muchísimas gracias. Sí, llevaba yo alrededor ya casi de 10 años de estar en casa sin trabajar, cuidando de mis hijos. De repente, como les digo, había voluntariado y como mamá había estado siempre involucrada en actividades, en cosas del centro hispano. La edad de mi hijo mayor, 18 años, en eventos, programas. Ahí conocí a la señora Pilar, ella fue la que me mandó la invitación, le agradezco con toda el alma. Desde entonces empezó a cambiar mi vida, ¿no? Me dijo como mamá, no sé, yo confío que tú puedes hacer este tipo de trabajo. Me puso en contacto con, en ese momento, la encargada, que era Katia. Entonces dijeron, vamos a empezar. Y yo, ¿a dónde voy? No sé. ¿Qué voy a hacer? Tampoco lo sé. Pero me dejé guiar. Siempre me ha gustado buscar oportunidades donde puedo aprender más. ¿Qué más puedo enseñar? ¿Qué más puedo traer a mi casa, a mi comunidad? Entonces me aventé. Tenía cero conocimientos de computadora, sabía aprenderla, encenderla y unas cositas. Yo no sabía qué era el Zoom, no sabía ni encender, no sabíamos nada prácticamente, mi persona más. Fue un reto bastante grande y bonito, porque dije, no, aquí hay mucho que aprender, hay mucho. Al principio los nervios me ganaban. Decía yo, no voy a poder. También todo eso me estresaba a la misma vez, porque decía, esto es para gente más preparada, más estudios, y yo decía, yo soy una mamá y he estado 10 años en casa, y yo no lo podía creer tampoco, pero conocí a mis compañeras, atravesamos esta etapa, juntas empezamos a crecer como persona, como mujeres. La mayoría o todas éramos mujeres, y ahorita nos llamamos las promotoras más viejas del centro hispano y entre nosotras. Pero ¿qué me hizo cambiar mi vida? Sentir más seguridad en mí misma, creer más en mi persona, porque estaba siendo capaz de pasar ese obstáculo, ¿verdad? Que yo decía, la tecnología, hablaban de estudios. Yo decía, ¿qué tipo de estudios? Como el resto de mi comunidad, ¿verdad? Cuando hablan de un estudio, uno piensa rápido en cosas negativas, en estos, ¿dónde van a ir esos datos? ¿Van a llegar con inmigración? ¿Qué tipo? ¿Me van a sacar sangre cuando decimos estudios? Cosas así que llenan tu mente, porque pues no conoces, ¿verdad? No sabes. Entonces, cosas así fueron cambiando mi manera de pensar, fui aprendiendo, fui entendiendo para qué era esto, fui capaz de llevar la casa y de llevar mis pocas horas que eran, pero eran bastante estudiar. Me quedaba yo hasta las 11, 12 mirando videos de YouTube. Para empezar, no sabía yo la palabra resiliencia. Yo practicaba, ¿qué es eso? ¿Cómo? ¿Cómo voy a hablar de algo que ni siquiera la palabra la conozco? Entonces yo buscaba maneras de seguir aprendiendo estas palabras nuevas que eran para mí. Igualmente, todo lo que nos dieron, la doctora Rosa, la doctora Irene, Gaby, todas estas personas nos orientaron, nos trajeron las capacitaciones, las información, nos conectaron a recursos. O sea, todo esto fue como un tesoro para mí, como una cajita de tesoros que teníamos ahí y yo no sabía que existían. Entonces, para mí, ser comunidad fue el principio de todo lo que es ahora, porque ahora soy una promotora de salud y me siento muy orgullosa de mí misma.
Oh, Dios mío, Beatriz, pues por eso es que hoy lo estamos celebrando aquí en familia, porque ustedes han sido el agente, la fuerza, ¿sí? Que realmente nosotros hemos hecho muchas cosas académicas, pero ustedes realmente son los que han podido lograr que estas cosas lleguen donde tienen que llevar. No sabías la definición de resiliencia, pero Dios, realmente sabes caminarlo y sabes exactamente qué haces y qué es una persona resiliencia. O sea, es lindo ver cómo todos estos conceptos en teoría los vemos aquí ilustrados en vida real. Bueno, mil gracias, Beatriz. Vamos a continuar con la segunda pregunta que quiero que empecemos Iván y luego Alex. Y vas en estos, perdón, aquí va. En estos últimos años, ustedes han tenido la experiencia de trabajar mucho con la comunidad y ha habido oportunidades que las instituciones académicas han querido venir a trabajar y a pedir la ayuda de ustedes para hacer proyectos de evaluación o investigaciones. ¿Cuáles han sido desde su perspectiva, desde su punto de vista, esas experiencias, esas barreras o los éxitos de esa comunicación, ustedes poder trabajar con estas instituciones que les piden ayuda para hacer esas investigaciones?
Bueno, pues gracias. Recuerdo que en el 2002, cuando era voluntario en la Iglesia Católica de la Inmaculada Concepción, muchos grupos de estudiantes de la Universidad del Duke venían y recuerdo, nunca se me va a olvidar este estudio que era de, creo que probar leches para no sé qué experimento estaban haciendo, pero llegaron con muchas tarjetas, ¿no? Muchas tarjetas para regalar y entonces casi siempre las preguntas de la comunidad era, ¿cuándo van a estar los resultados? ¿Quién va a compartir los resultados? Era como que la gente llega a nuestras comunidades y luego se desaparecían, ¿verdad? O de repente después de meses o años veíamos resultados creo que yo participé en esto, o fue la tarjeta que recibí, algo similar, ¿no? Entonces, cuando vino la pandemia, obviamente durante la pandemia, pues empezamos a ver la urgencia, la necesidad de las instituciones médicas, el gobierno, la necesidad de obtener información para cómo poder atender al problema que estábamos experimentando, más las personas de color, ¿no? Porque obviamente se entendía que iba a haber una resistencia a compartir información personal, a divulgar o abrir esa puerta a nuestra privacidad íntima de información, ¿no? Igual, necesitábamos recursos, pero era como que una cosa por otra, ¿no? Entonces creo que ser inmigrantes cuando eres parte de un estudio, cuando te buscan para dar tu retroalimentación en algún tema específico, en alguna necesidad, pues creo que siempre va a ser esa incertidumbre, ¿no? Con quién se va a compartir información y eso, ¿no? Y yo pienso que el sistema también sé que ha cambiado o poco a poco está cambiando, pero igual creo que puede mejorar, ¿no? Creo que puede mejorar en esa en esa relación más intrínseca entre la comunidad, pero me refiero a la comunidad con gente como nosotros, ¿no? Como Beatriz, como Alex, gente que estamos trabajando frente a frente con la comunidad. Yo pienso que puede ser mejor, ¿no? Y yo creo que las preguntas, las investigaciones, evaluaciones, todo eso se pueden formular con la ayuda de la comunidad, ¿no? Y entonces ha habido buenas y malas experiencias, ¿no? Durante la pandemia recuerdo que se nos llegaban encuestas como de 20 preguntas, ¿no? ¿Qué está pasando en la comunidad? ¿Están haciendo esto? Y era como a veces sentía un bombardeo más en cuanto, bueno, uno estaba protegiéndose del virus, pero era una encuesta tras otra, pero a veces nosotros experimentábamos que las cosas no cambiaban en la comunidad, ¿no? O sea, yo personalmente pues siempre he abogado por la comunidad y era una lucha constante cuestionar por qué esto así, por qué esto no, quién dice, por qué la urgencia, no, la comunidad no está aceptando esto, tenemos que cambiar esto, ¿no? Entonces, recuerdo, por último, quiero compartir que yo me fui a trabajar más de 3 meses a Greensboro con la Guardia Nacional y también con FIMA y el estado, ¿no? Entonces llegamos allá y pues se vacunaban 10,000 personas a la semana, pero tuvimos que cambiar tantísimas cosas, ¿no? Entonces, antes se habían hecho retroalimentaciones, cómo voy a funcionar las cosas, digo, pero creo que escuchar a la comunidad en momento real, con la gente que está metida en la comunidad, creo que va a ser la clave para muchísimas cosas, ¿no? Estamos hablando de cambiar el sistema, pero yo pienso que puede ser mucho mejor y agradezco que haya más personas hispanas en posiciones de poder, en instituciones médicas, en estos que creen estos espacios, porque escuchar a la comunidad que está trabajando en la comunidad y aparte pues nosotros como Beatriz, Alex, también somos afectados por muchos asuntos en la comunidad, entonces creo que esta colaboración es súper importante y ojalá se mantenga y también recibamos más recursos, no solamente económicos, pero más educativos, ¿no? Como lo que mencionaron del futuro. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Iván. Qué excelente el trabajo que ustedes y la dedicación que han podido dedicarle a la comunidad durante estos momentos de crisis. Bueno, voy entonces a moverme a la próxima pregunta para dársela a Alex. Alex, como hemos visto de nuevo en estos estresores migratorios y de eventos ahora con la pandemia, ¿qué te ha movido para continuar ser un promotor de salud? ¿Sí? ¿Qué es lo que te lleva para trabajar? ¿Cuáles son esas cosas que te hacen seguir adelante y no tirar la toalla en estos momentos de crisis?
Bueno, gracias, gracias Iván. Nosotros somos una sola familia aquí en Beatriz. Gracias por tu intervención. Eso es lo que nos lleva a estar en esto, Rosa. Lloramos, sentimos, nos deprimimos, pero también nos levantamos. Una de las cosas que nos lleva a estar en esto es de que nosotros no dependemos ni del dinero, ni del tiempo, ni de un nombre. Nosotros somos corazón, ¿verdad? Nosotros no estamos esperanzados a que llegó el gran y entonces lo vamos a hacer, ¿verdad? Nosotros tenemos un chip, no sé de dónde nos apareció, ¿verdad? Pero yo sé que mis compañeros aquí me entienden. Iván dijo algo de estudios y de todo esto. Nosotros hemos sido, bueno, Duke ha sido nuestra escuela de alguna manera, pero hace algunos años, cuando yo vine de San Francisco, yo llegué por la puerta grande, según yo, porque el tema mío era LGBT y aquí no había nada. Aquí LGBT parecía como que era LGBT, nombre de medicina, ¿no? Entonces me dijeron que había más iglesias que niños y que me hablara mucho del tema porque aquí no se podía. Entonces yo dije, wow, pero si yo vengo de San Francisco, de la meca del LGBT, los derechos de los inmigrantes, y solo va uno al City Hall y le dan los montones de dinero, la Universidad de San Francisco nos daba dinero para un montón de cosas, pero aquí, cállense. Han pasado 17 años de eso y me da mucho orgullo decir que en LGBT estamos extremadamente bien en relación de hace 15 años. Alex, Córdoba y Lila me conocen o nos conocen en todo el estado. tenemos un espacio en los medios de comunicación. Pero curiosamente, hace algunos años nos invitaron al departamento de maestros de Duke, donde los maestros que trabajan con personas que vienen de otros países latinos y que son de la comunidad LGBT, y nos preguntaban, ¿cómo los podemos tratar? Entonces me di cuenta que necesitábamos seguir trabajando en el tema LGBT. ¿Qué nos motiva a estar en esto? Bueno, nos motiva que nosotros sabemos, como decía Iván, cómo conseguir voluntarios, cuál es el lenguaje que tenemos que utilizar, cuál es la sensibilidad que tenemos para poder tener esos voluntarios. Me gusta, me motiva ver que la gente está dispuesta, que la gente viene con nosotros los latinos, no con Lila, con los latinos. Que hay gente, familias enteras, y un hecho está como Beatriz Vázquez, que era una ama de casa, fue voluntaria y ahora la tenemos en Zoom, aprendió Zoom y es una mujer que tiene un salario, ¿me entiendes? Eso es lo que me motiva a mí, crear personas. A mí no me motiva que vamos a hacer una campaña y nos manden 10,000 flyers en inglés y que yo hablo español. No, eso no funciona, ¿me entiendes? Aquí es one by one, uno contra uno. Decía Iván, nosotros sabemos el idioma popular, el idioma de la calle, el idioma con que nosotros como trabajadores de salud vamos a llegar con el mensaje a esas personas para lograr los objetivos. Sí es cierto, necesitamos recursos económicos, pero también hay otros recursos. He estado escuchando lo del futuro. El futuro es una espléndida organización. O sea, es maravillosa, pero nuestra comunidad ha crecido y necesitamos más recursos, ya sea para hacer 10 futuros con el mismo futuro o tener servicios similares. Porque nosotros como trabajadores de salud sí tenemos motivación, pero hay un valladar cuando ya no podemos pasar esa línea. Tenemos 25 personas a quien referir para salud mental y el futuro no puede porque está ocupado, porque tiene mucha gente. Entonces, ¿cuál es el plan B? Vamos a seguir analizando un focus group por 2 años para que en 5 años, entonces la cuestión es ahora, ¿verdad? ¿Qué me motiva a mí? A mí me motiva la sensibilidad, me motiva que como latino soy escuchado para resolver. ¿Qué aprendimos en la pandemia? Aprendimos muchísimo. Aprendimos que somos seres humanos y que tenemos todos que darnos la mano. Verá que las organizaciones latinas y no latinas tenemos que estar unidos y trabajar juntos en un propósito. Nosotros como LGBT aprendimos que somos inmersos en una totalidad y aprendimos también, nosotros estábamos en los compares repartiendo información de la vacuna, mascarillas, y fue fantástico ver que la gente no preguntaba, ¿son transgéneros o son gay? ¿Son bisexuales o lo son? No, éramos personas que estábamos trabajando en la comunidad, ¿verdad? Entonces rompimos el esquema, ¿verdad? Entonces, te digo que eso es lo que a nosotros como trabajadores de salud comunitarios, y ha sido una experiencia fantástica, ¿verdad? Ha sido una experiencia fantástica porque incluso esta reunión de Zoom, yo digo el Zoom de la doctora Viviana, yo así lo identifico. Esto está funcionando por la pandemia, ¿verdad? Entonces todo este trabajo que estamos haciendo, el ver a mis amigos aquí, el conocer en Zoom a la doctora Rosa Solórzano, esto es el resultado de ser trabajadores, ¿verdad? Aquí tenemos 60 personas, habían 70. O sea, eso es la magia de la tecnología, pero también el producto de la pandemia. O sea que nosotros como trabajadores de salud tenemos que estar de la mano todos.
Gracias, Alex. Maravilloso. Qué bueno. Pues qué motivación tan grande y qué ejemplo nos das, porque todo lo que hagamos lo tenemos que hacer de corazón, ¿cierto? O sea que... Pero entonces, ustedes han llevado una carga grandísima. Estamos en la comunidad, nos hemos enfrentado con todas estas cosas que han sido difíciles. Ahora, mi pregunta para los tres es, ¿qué han hecho para protegerse? ¿Qué han hecho para manejar ese estrés acculturativo durante todo este proceso, tanto a largo plazo como ahora en estos últimos días? Si quiere, cualquiera puede empezar.
Puedo responder yo. Yo pienso que yo personalmente tuve que entender que no somos Dios para resolverle la vida a las demás personas, ¿verdad? A todo el mundo. Porque todo el mundo nos llama a la hora que quieren, no respeta nuestra vida personal también. O sea, si te ven en la calle, en el mall, donde quiera, la gente te agarra y, mire, tengo una pregunta. Entonces, hay que aprender a decir no también, ¿verdad? Y esto fue durante la pandemia porque dije, esto es mundial. No, esto no lo voy a cambiar la vida a la gente. Entonces, darles esos espacios. A mí me gusta mucho cocinar, me gusta comer para mí el alimento es algo sagrado. Y yo si me siento a comer, no quiero que me molesten, el teléfono a un lado, o sea, esas cositas tuve que aprenderlas. ¿Por qué? Porque para mí, hasta un vaso de agua tengo que dar. Entonces, para mí era eso, y también establecer tiempos, espacios donde no quiero hablar de trabajo, aquí no sé nada, y bla, bla, y cambiar de amistades, estar con amistades que no tienen nada que ver con mi trabajo. Entonces, sí, la gente que me conoce de cerca saben que soy muy estricto en eso. ¿Y por qué? Porque es por mi salud mental. Entonces, ¿por qué? Porque también tenemos que ser ejemplo para las personas, ¿no? Y uno comparte esto con la gente con la que uno trabaja. Entonces, hay que hacerlo porque la mente, pues, está difícil, ¿no? A veces ya cuando menos se desprecias, tienes mucho estrés, mucha depresión y todo eso, y es algo que tu cuerpo te lo cobra tarde o temprano. Así es que eso fue lo que tuve que aprender yo.
Excelente consejo, Iván. ¿Ok? Tenemos que aprender a dar esa pausa y decir no en algunos momentos. Muy bien. Beatriz.
Yo también, similar a mi compañero Iván, lo conozco de hace tiempo, nos conocimos en la calle así también. Antes de todo esto, hacía kermés, apoyé mucho en eso desde temprano, eran 3 días de trabajo, desde tempranito recolectar, hacer una lista, recolectar ingredientes, ir por ellos y cocinar desde un día anterior, para recaudar fondos para mi comunidad, ¿verdad? Cualquier tipo de problema que tenían, era cansadísimo, estar en una plancha haciendo tortillas, pupusas por 10 horas, totalmente en el frío o en el calor. Yo también, decía un sacerdote, era la luz en la calle, oscuridad de mi casa, porque ese día yo no miraba a mis hijos, esos días era como el papá me ayudaba con ellos. Entonces tuve que aprender lo que dice Iván, decir no, cuando podía, y ya fui aprendiendo esas partes, fui aprendiendo de que no le podemos solucionar la vida a la gente, no le podemos dar el pescado servido en un plato, tenemos que enseñarlos a pescar. Entonces, eso es lo que más me ha ayudado a buscar los recursos, sí, pero hacer que ellos lo conozcan, que ellos lo sepan usar. Por ejemplo, en mi departamento ahora que es educación, como promotora estoy en el departamento de educación, he enseñado a tantos padres, yo que no sabía hace 3 años ni siquiera que era un Zoom, a que bajen la aplicación, a que la usen para sus hijos, o sea, tantas cosas que he aprendido, me han enseñado a cómo usar todas esas herramientas, porque bien dice, nuestra escuela ha sido el DUC, la doctora Rosa, Irene, todas ustedes todos, nos han enseñado tanto cosas que no sabíamos cómo manejar el estrés, cómo manejar o cómo hablar de ser paciente cuando tú eres madre de 5 y tienes que estar no solo en Zoom en casa, con tus hijos dando esas clases, pero también tenías que recibir esas llamadas a las 11 de la noche. Mañana hay clases y yo, sí, señora, su escuela debería de tener clases, ¿no? Cositas así que fui aprendiendo y dije, no más teléfono, después de las 9 yo no les contesto ya más, pero todavía está eso. Entonces he podido manejarlo, decir no cuando es no, decir sí cuando yo puedo y llevarlos y enseñarles a ellos mismos a que hagan lo que yo aprendí. Yo quiero, mi meta es que todos conozcamos y podamos, y siempre les digo, si yo puedo, tú también puedes, seas mamá, seas papá, seas hijo, hermano, tío, abuelo, todos podemos, todos somos capaces.
Excelente. Alex, en un minuto.
Un minuto.
Que tengo
Bueno,
todavía otra pregunta que quiero que respondamos y
bueno,
se nos está quedando, nos queda poco tiempo.
dentro de todo lo que es la pandemia, murió mi hermano, murió mi tía, murió mi abuela. Yo como manejador de todo esto también he visto morir gente, referencias, hacer citas para las vacunaciones, las campañas, el supply, los Zoom, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Yo tengo un psicólogo con quien platico, y tengo un psicólogo desde hace casi un año, ¿verdad? Que pedí la necesidad. Y mi psicólogo platicaba conmigo cada semana y ahora lo hemos dejado cada mes. Pero también surgió la idea de que así como yo necesito un apoyo, también la comunidad lo necesita. Y entonces en mi organización creamos el programa Living la Vida Lila. Y que lo pueden ver en nuestra página. Living la Vida Lila es salud mental. O sea, Living la Vida Lila es ser feliz, estar relajado. Living la Vida Lila es respirar, caminar, nadar, navegar en la pandemia, navegar en tu vida. Tenemos retiros, etcétera, etcétera, ¿verdad? Entonces, también aprendimos de que podemos tener todos los recursos, pero que si el ser humano por él mismo no se arregla su vida, podemos estar riéndonos, pero por dentro no nos vamos a estar riendo, ¿verdad? Nosotros que hemos estado en este trabajo por años, o sea, en la pandemia, las 2 de la mañana ha sido temprano, las 4 de la mañana ha sido tarde, no hemos sido de horario, ¿verdad? Hemos estado inventando y como decía también Beatriz, hemos tenido que decir que apagar teléfonos, que tomarnos un break, ¿verdad? Pero hemos aprendido mucho, ¿verdad? Hemos aprendido mucho y yo personalmente digo, si quiero seguir cuidándome, pues tengo que buscar yo cómo drenar mis emociones, mis preocupaciones, porque que el Corán no llegó es una preocupación. Que terminaron las vacunas también es una preocupación. Que cómo vamos a hacer con la mascarilla es una preocupación. ¿Verdad? Que nos lo llevamos hasta la hora de dormir, ¿verdad? Entonces, pero eso es lo que yo he hecho a nivel personal y a nivel de organización, pues el Living la Vida Lila nos ha dado un buen resultado porque tenemos retiros, tenemos una psicóloga, estamos platicando con la comunidad, lo hacemos en vía Zoom, ¿verdad? Y estamos trabajando también con maestros de las escuelas de algunos condados. Y bueno, eso es exactamente en un minuto lo que te puedo decir.
Muchas gracias, Alex. Bueno, quiero hacernos esto. Hemos estado maravillados y eternamente agradecidos por el trabajo que ustedes han hecho en las trincheras, que han trabajado hombro a hombro a todos los niveles con la comunidad, porque conocen muy bien la comunidad, porque son de la comunidad. Entonces, quisiéramos preguntarles cómo ha sido ese impacto de su trabajo en la comunidad y en el sistema de salud, y cómo se consideran ustedes un agente de cambio.
Puedo responder yo. Yo pienso que el impacto que ha hecho nuestro trabajo que hemos realizado en la comunidad ha sido muy grande, ¿no? Yo pienso que el poder tener la confianza muy de cerca con la comunidad, eso cambia simplemente la vida de la gente, ¿no? Por el temor hay gente que no comparte con los doctores que son indocumentados, hay gente que no comparte ni con los maestros de la escuela que no tienen papeles, que no tienen un seguro y que por ende no pueden tener acceso a muchos recursos, ¿no? Yo pienso que esa confianza que uno tiene en la comunidad es muy, muy valiosa. Por eso a la misma vez tenemos una responsabilidad sobre los hombros que la cuidamos mucho, ¿no? Es como algo carísimo, ¿no? Porque si no tenemos si rompemos con la confianza, con esas puertas que nos abren de la casa, con ese vecindario que llegamos, repartimos comida, que estamos dando información sobre la vacuna, yo pienso que tenemos que ser muy cuidadosos, ¿no? Aunque a veces algunas personas nos llaman gatekeepers, que estamos controlando, que no, pero es que no, porque tenemos una historia en la comunidad, ¿no? Yo pienso que no cualquier organización, no cualquier institución puede llegar a una comunidad y tratar de cambiar cosas, o si no, no, o sea, aquí se respetan las comunidades y creo que eso es lo que nos diferencia a nosotros de muchas personas, ¿no? El que estamos cerca de la comunidad y trabajando ahí, ese hace del impacto, yo creo, muy grande, ¿no?
Gracias, Iván.
Así es, también, como decía Iván, antes conocí a aquellas pocas personas, ahora nos ven allá afuera, tomando la presión o simplemente con el uniforme. A veces termino de trabajar y salgo, aprovecho como toda mamá, salgo de trabajo, me voy por los niños, me voy al mercado y a veces llevo la playera y todavía en el mercado haciendo mi vida rutinaria, todavía me paran, me preguntan, ay, tú eres del centro y hay vacunas esta semana y ¿qué tenemos? O sea, y la ventaja de esto, yo siempre digo, el COVID trajo mucha desgracia, como la familia del señor Alex, que perdió tanta familia, muchas familias así. Conocimos personas que gracias al COVID crecimos profesionalmente también. Entonces, gracias al COVID también nos hizo ver nuestra resiliencia, que es muy fuerte, que podemos salir, que tenemos muchos beneficios. Yo descubrí que hay muchos recursos que antes no los conocía, no sabía dónde estaban, no sabía cómo acceder a ellos. Ahora tocando puertas, viendo todo esto, conocimos tanto y le trajimos todo esto a las personas y seguimos buscando, seguimos como la gallina, rascando dónde hay más, qué más podemos traerle y cómo abrir esos recursos sin que nos atropellen, ¿verdad? Yo me refiero a que no nos pidan el seguro social, que no nos pidan todo esto, ¿verdad? Porque hay muchos recursos, pero lamentablemente nuestra gente no puede hacer uso de ellos porque ese es el primer impedimento.
Muchas gracias, Beatriz. Alex.
¿Cuál ha sido el impacto? Bueno, yo voy a poner de ejemplo a mi amigo Iván Almonte. Si Iván Almonte, su trabajo, lo cuantificáramos en dinero, tuviera unos 5 edificios de apartamentos en el centro de Durham. ¿Verdad? O sea, es demasiado lo que se ha hecho, ¿verdad? ¿Qué hago yo? Yo ocupo mis recursos para el cambio, de una manera muy, muy apropiada. A veces me encuentran por allí y dicen, puedes hacer una conferencia, puedes estar en un Zoom, puedes estar aquí. Entonces, sí, porque cuando uno dice, Alex lo dijo, ya lo decía mi compañera Beatriz, es que Alex dice, entonces la gente te cree. Nos volvemos como así en unas pequeñas madres Teresas de Calcuta, ¿no? Así en los barrios. Y yo creo que esto funciona también por barrios, por ejemplo, el barrio de Beatriz, el barrio de Iván, el barrio de Alex. Cada quien tiene su barrio, ¿verdad? Nos ha tocado, como decía ella, enseñarles el Zoom. ¿Cómo es el Zoom? Mira, nos ha tocado con peras y manzanas a la gente, ¿verdad? Entonces, esa manera que tenemos nosotros de estar allí con nuestra comunidad, que la volvemos familia. Por eso es que yo siempre insisto, ¿no? No digo latinos con latinos, no. Yo digo sensibilidad latina, ¿verdad? Porque a veces nos mandan información de unos grandes summit y simposium de no sé cuánto, pero quieren a los latinos no van a estar porque ellos no lo van a entender. Ya decía Beatriz, resiliencia, le costó entender que resiliencia, pero si esa misma palabra le escribimos de otra manera, para nuestra gente, para la señora de las pupusas, para la señora de las tortillas, porque es lo que queremos alcanzar. ¿Quién es la gente que va a Lincoln? Esa gente. O sea, la gente que tiene plata no va a ir a Lincoln. Tiene seguros, ¿verdad? Y es más, quiero también no dejar yo soy un poco terrorista en esto. A los latinos que somos ciudadanos americanos, que hablamos full inglés y que ya tenemos títulos universitarios, tampoco vamos a estar en los barrios luchando por nuestros latinos, ¿verdad? Son muy pocos los que se van a bajar del trono y van a venir a decir, y van al monte, ¿en qué te puedo ayudar? ¿Puedo ser voluntario, Beatriz? ¿Verdad? Entonces, esto sí me gusta decirlo porque los estamos en la trinchera, ¿verdad? Y creo que este es un espacio que podemos hablar de cómo yo puedo ver mi futuro en esto. Aquí vamos a estar, Rosa, hasta el último suspiro. Aquí vamos a estar en Durham, vamos a escuchar, pueden venir 10 pandemias y aquí vamos a estar. Nada más que queremos apoyo, queremos recursos, queremos dinero, queremos todo, porque así como nos invitan, ¿verdad? Y van así, bien bonito, pero también queremos, bueno, podemos hablar de muchos temas. Queremos ser escuchados, pues queremos que realmente ser incluidos y que hayan cambios. Ya dejamos allí creo que nos podemos llevar la idea de que se necesitan más futuros. Eso es lo que necesitamos para salud mental. Post pandemia necesitamos más futuros. O le damos más dinero a futuro para que haga todo el shopping center de clínica, ¿verdad? O nos entrenan para que podamos hacer nosotros lo mismo, ¿verdad? Así es que ahí está la cuestión. Gracias.
Alex, mil gracias. Por eso ustedes y todos juntos estamos en este cambio de narrativa. ¿Sí? En este cambio de narrativa aprendimos mucho sobre estos momentos, aprendimos mucho de que este trabajo no se podía haber hecho sin el esfuerzo de los trabajadores comunitarios. Hemos aprendido en nuestras investigaciones que sin el trabajo de los comunitarios, sin el trabajo de mi Marilú Solís, sin el trabajo de las promotoras de salud, no se podrían hacer estas iniciativas para el bienestar de todos. O sea que mil gracias por compartir sus experiencias y sus situaciones personales para todos estar y aprender de esto. No creo que estamos en el tiempo, pero no sé si tenemos un minuto para alguna otra pregunta de la audiencia. Bueno, y si no, entonces, Maraliz, devuelvo la pelota a tu...
Yo quiero preguntar algo.
Sí.
Yo quiero comentar algo.
Adelante, Humberto.
Sí, yo quiero comentar nada más. Yo cuando inicié como colaborador comunitario apoyando a la comunidad en la educación, yo me especializo en la educación también como mi compañera Beatriz. Trabajamos juntos en el Departamento de Educación en el Centro Hispano. Pero yo cuando comencé en esto fue cuando empecé a apoyar a mi hijo para que fuera a la universidad. Y aprendí demasiadas cosas que tenemos que no sabía que existían. Y descubrí muchas cosas que existen, pero que no son compartidas equitativamente. Siempre me apoyé de Iván, lo reconozco, se lo he dicho todo el tiempo, hasta que por fin dije, bueno, no, Iván va a estar todo el tiempo para mí. Y empecé a buscar las cosas por mi propia cuenta. Pero Iván fue un soporte muy grande para mí. Y lo admiro, y admiro a mis compañeros, a Beatriz, Alex. Alex, me gustó mucho lo que dijiste ahorita al final. Necesitamos 1000 futuros, y si no, pues que consigan otro shopping center. Y así fue como inicié. Y le agradezco a Iván por todo el apoyo que me brindó. A veces yo sentía que lo cansaba de tanta pregunta, ¿cómo lo hago aquí? ¿Cómo le hago allá? Él tenía grupos en las escuelas públicas anteriormente y por eso yo me dediqué a seguirlo. No a imitarlo, porque no lo imito, pero me siento orgulloso de haber sido, de que él haya sido una inspiración para mí, como quien dice. Y ahorita, hoy por hoy, a lo mejor él se fue un poco de las escuelas públicas y me quedé yo. Me quedé con eso.
Qué gran, y mil gracias, Humberto. Marilu.
Sí, yo estoy aquí corriendo y sudando y escuchándolos. Quiero agradecer a cada uno de las personas que hacen posible esto. Yo, como mis compañeros, como Alex, como Iván, como Betty, como Humberto, como ustedes, Ser Hispano, quien hemos trabajado juntos para un bienestar para nuestra comunidad, para los latinos, dándole acceso a estas comunidades vulnerables. Así que yo quiero agradecer a cada uno. Siempre he dicho que somos un rompecabezas y cada uno de nosotros aporta uno de los regalos que la vida nos ha dado. Así que yo solamente quiero decir gracias, doctora Rosa, doctora G, cada uno de ustedes, Maralisa, cada persona que he tenido la oportunidad de compartir trabajo en comunidad, trabajo profesional, Iván, con quien estuve trabajando para respeto, con la Inmaculada, con Betty, que yo he visto sus pasos, he visto su crecimiento. Solamente puedo decir gracias a todos. Los quiero mucho, gracias por su trabajo y un aplauso para todos.
Okay. Mil gracias, muchas gracias a todos.